Research paper, data and methods. The data and methods section are generally the easiest to write, particularly if you have kept good notes as you collected data and performed your analysis. This section is straightforward and presented without much flourish usually, although it's good if it is interesting to read as you do not present results. It is usually a matter of fact explanation of what you did. The section should read like a road map to your research. It discusses where it started, the steps you took in between, and where the research ended up, which leads right into the next section, the results. It is helpful to write an outline for this section of all the points you will cover and make notes as you go over all of the steps you took to get there. Much like when you collected the literature, the steps you take may be modified as you go, so keeping track of how you performed each step is important, and noting changes when you make them. As you collect the data and perform the analysis, keeping good notes will make this section easy to write. This entire section is simply a description of what you did. You are seeking to paint a picture of what you did in your research. The section can get complicated and boring to read, but try not to let it. Keep the sentences simple and straightforward and validate or explain the steps. You may refer back to other studies or explain methods in the way a textbook would explain them. Other studies will all have this step, so you can look at how others have done it and see how each of their methods of explanation might be used in your paper. When describing the data, explain where it comes from. For example, if it is from an online community, describe and explain that online community. Don't be afraid to use numbers. How many members or views? For the introduction part of your data, it is necessary that you obtain this data on your own because you are describing the context and setting of your data. You then need to explain the process that you used to obtain the data and the characteristics of the data you obtained. This is a good place for a table or two to present it in a logical manner and to break up the monotony of explanation. If information in a table can be understood without explanation, then you should not explain the table. The data subsection should not be used to discuss any findings, only to describe the data before any analysis. In this section of the paper, you must describe everything done in a step-by-step way. It should be easy to follow so it could be replicated by others, like a science experiment. Describe how you collected the data and how you performed the analysis in an exact way that explains what you did. It provides a strong foundation for your results if your methods are easy to follow and makes your research more reputable. Usually, each paragraph or subsection of the method section talks about a specific method, often pertaining to each hypothesis. Early in each paragraph, explain the rationale behind your choices of that particular method. For example, why you chose a certain site or type of analysis. You can also include a detailed rationale for selecting the exclusion or inclusion criteria. If you used a conventional or widely used method, you don't need to state the obvious, but for less conventional approaches, sharing your reasoning of the study design instantly makes the readers curious and more engaged with your paper. This section is a good place for visualizations to provide explanations. Generally, information about the data is provided in tables, but other types of visualizations can be used if they work with your idea. Using visualizations can help break up the section of the paper and increase the ability of it to be easily understood and increase the readability. Look at how other papers have done this to determine what types of visualizations may work for you. You will likely have many visualizations for the results section, so just be clear about which visualization fits best in each section. There are many ways you can make this section the best it can be. Be sure to follow the logical order of how you did what you did. You are telling the story of how you got the data and how you analyzed it, so it's important to make sure it makes sense and is in the correct order. The story won't make sense if it is told out of order. This section often benefits from subheadings, like suggested earlier for the data. You can make subheadings for the analyses as well. This helps to keep this section organized and easy to follow. You should also be providing details. Most details regarding what you did will help others to follow your reasoning. Details help a story to be more interesting also, and can help you to break the monotony of writing this section. Your study will have variables, whether you recognize them as such or not. Take time to identify the variables. They are likely the items you chose to analyze simply because you knew they were factors, but there may be other variables that you can't change. Each of these should be identified and explained. Often, variables seem like common knowledge to the researcher because you have spent so much time looking at it, but they are not common knowledge to most people, and taking the time to explain them can really help others to understand your research. Toward the end of the methods section, you are setting the stage to discuss your results. You have to discuss how you performed the statistical analysis that you will present the results of in the next section. It makes for an easy transition to the next section and allows you to highlight how you did the analysis. This means that you can't write this section without knowing where you are going with the analysis. A good outline can help you separate what goes into each section. The methods section is really like the instructions, the steps you took to get your results. The story is a cliffhanger with the results presented in the next section. It is meant to be that way, but keeping it separate can be challenging. Since quantitative methods is really the focus of the course, we'll spend some time in other presentations discussing it. However, here we'll discuss it as it pertains to this section of your paper. Quantitative methods emphasize on objective measurements and numerical analysis of data collected through polls, questionnaires, or surveys. Quantitative research focuses on gathering numerical data and generalizing it across groups of people. In quantitative research, your goal is to determine the relationship between one thing, independent variable, and another, a dependent or outcome variable, in a population. Quantitative research designs are either descriptive, subjects usually measured once, or experimental, subjects measured before and after a treatment. A descriptive study establishes only associations between variables. An experiment establishes causality. Quantitative research deals in numbers, logic, and the objective, focusing on logic, numbers, and unchanging static data in detailed, convergent reasoning rather than divergent reasoning. Its main characteristics are: the data is usually gathered using more structured research instruments. The results are based on larger sample sizes that are representative of the population. The research study can usually be replicated or repeated given its high reliability. Researchers has a clearly defined research question to which objective answers are sought. All aspects of the study are carefully designed before data is collected. The data are in the form of numbers and statistics. The project can be used to generalize concepts more widely, predict future results, or investigate causal relationships. Researchers use tools such as equipment to collect numerical data. The overarching aim of a quantitative research study is to classify features, count them, and construct statistical models in an attempt to explain what is observed. Things to keep in mind when reporting the results of a study using quantitative methods. Explain the data collected and their statistical treatment, as well as all relevant results in relation to the research problem. You are investigating. Interpretation of results is not appropriate in this section. Report unanticipated events that occurred during your data collection. Explain how the actual analysis differs from the planned analysis. Explain your handling of missing data. Explain the techniques you use to clean your data set. Choose a minimally sufficient statistical procedure. Provide a rationale for its use and a reference for it. Specify any computer programs used. Describe the assumptions for each procedure and the steps you took to ensure that they were not violated. When using inferential statistics, provide the descriptive statistics, confidence intervals, and sample sizes for each variable, as well as the value of the test statistic, its direction, the degrees of freedom, and the significance level, or report the actual p-value. Avoid inferring causality, particularly in non-randomized designs or without further explanation. Use tables to provide exact values. Use figures to convey global effects. Keep figures small in size. Include graphic representations of confidence intervals whenever possible. Always tell the reader what to look for in tables and figures. Each section, and even within the sections, you need to remember to transition sentences to move from one area to the next, as your analysis will lead into the results you obtained from the analysis. This is often easier in this section, but be sure to do so. Also, make sure you have used transitions between the subsections within the methods section as well.